Yes, good afternoon, good morning maybe for someone, good evening to everyone. Thank you very much for joining our Cacao webinar today. It will be the last one for this year, but we will continue next year. So again, thank you for taking your time to listen to us. Today we shall zoom into an interesting subject, is how to find buyers and moreover how to do business with them. And this will be presented by Gustavo and Lisanne, whom many of you know already, but they will introduce themselves later on. And we have today, which I think is very interesting, is we will interview two cocoa buyers, Justine Chesnoy and Mariana de la Rosa, and they will introduce, because they can do that much better, themselves later on. Next slide, please, Gustavo. So yeah, here we are. First of all, I'm going to take only 5 minutes from your time to very shortly explain to you CBI. Next slide. I am Justine Chesnoy, and I'm the CBI Market Intelligence Program Manager for the sectors cocoa, but also for coffee and home decoration, home textile. And my previous work before was, I've been a green coffee trader for over 25 years. Next slide, please. So for the ones who don't know CBI yet, we are the center of the promotion imports from developing countries. And it's our mission to connect the small to medium-sized exporters to the European market. And we thereby contribute to sustainable and inclusive economic growth. And how we do this is mainly because we put up projects with practical solutions for the bottleneck in the export value chain. And one of these bottlenecks is a lack of access to good market information. That's why we're here today, to help you to have this market information. And moreover, CBI creates value through knowledge and deploying networks, as well as in the European Union market, as in the developing countries, in the sectors that we are active in. And we focus on certain themes like youth or gender or digitalization. Next slide, please. We work with target countries, which are being set and published on our website. Next, please. And we work in 14 sectors. You see here on the screen, and of course today we focus ourselves on cocoa. Next slide, please. And so what kind of information do we provide? First of all, we provide all our market information on our website, and it's free for everybody. We divide them into market analyze modules and market entry models. You see here which kind of studies we make. So like, what is the demand in Europe and what are the trends which can offer you opportunities. We do buyer requirements or tips on finding European buyers. So that's a little bit the focus for today. And of course, for how to do business with European buyers. How to organize your export. And we have recently this year added a new study, and that's tips to go digital, which will be soon published on our website for the sector cocoa. Next, please. We also make country and or product fact sheets, depending a little bit on the sector. Fact sheets on the most promising export countries in Europe. And we hold, like today, free webinars to inform you on different topics, and we publish news items on actual news relating to the cocoa market. And all the information, as I said before, you can find on our website. You see here our website address. Next slide, please. And just one last remark before we actually start the nice part of the webinar is, if you have any questions, please put them in the question box. You have the tool in front of you, and at the end of this webinar we will have some time to answer these questions. If we run out of time, then we will answer these questions later to you via the email. So Gustavo, the floor is yours.
Hi, First of all, thank you all for attending today. I'm Lisanne Groothuis, and I am one of the market researchers for the CBI studies for both the coffee and the cacao sector. And I work for a Dutch consultancy firm, Profound, and together with the Profound team, we facilitate sustainable trade promotion by providing market intelligence services, support in compliance, and also by facilitating and developing market access activities. And yeah, for the CBI work, I work together with Gustavo, who will introduce himself.
I'm Gustavo Ferro. I work on behalf of Profound. I work on the CBI studies. I've been working on international trade and development projects for 14 years, more or less. I'm an independent consultant. And I also work for other organizations like CIPO and IPD, which are also import promotion organizations. And since 2008, I've been somehow involved in the studies for cacao and coffee. And I've been lucky enough to also do some projects in the field, in the Dominican Republic, more recently Ecuador, Colombia, being involved, in Liberia. I also did a study, and with Peru, I'm somehow involved as well. And for CBI specifically, I was also doing the value chain analysis for the Connecting Central America program. So this is me, and Lisanne, can you please introduce the agenda for us?
Yes, and I would like to start with the takeaways, because we hope after today's session that you have gained some practical insights into how to do business with European cocoa buyers, also how to reach out to them, and very important, also how to build long-lasting relationships with cocoa buyers. So this session will be some sort of an interview style, like a conversation, where Gustavo and myself, we will introduce the topic, and then we will ask our guest speakers, Justine and Mariana, questions about the topic. Yeah, after their introduction, we will look or dive into the questions around what cocoa buyers are looking for, how to maintain a business relationship in Europe. We will follow with the topic around compliance and non-compliance. And hopefully there's still enough time left for a question and answer session. And before we move on, I would like to make one disclaimer, and that's if you could please, don't flood our guest speakers with many emails after this session to start a trade or anything related to that. We would recommend, if you have any questions, to just post them in the question box or send an email to CBI, and then we try to answer your questions, and in specific cases we might forward your requests. But we would like to ask some collaboration to not flood our guest speakers' inboxes. So thank you for that.
Yeah, maybe just to remind you guys that this is a follow-up from a previous webinar that we did. As Justine already mentioned, we spoke before about finding buyers and also using different online tools and resources to benchmark your product, but also to promote your products. And especially during COVID, I think this was a very specifically important webinar that we had, and this you can find on the CBI website. I have the address here and also what it looks like so that you can click on it. And also, of course, we've been publishing a lot of news items. You can see the latest one. We are talking about the effect of Brexit on the UK, but also in the EU cocoa sector. So these are interesting things that we've been publishing on the website. And today specifically, we are focusing on a subject that is also published on the website in the form of a study, which is tips to do business. So we're building on that and bringing you guys some real case experiences from our guest speakers. And I will ask Justine Chesnoy to please introduce herself and her company. And thank you so much for being here.
Hello, thank you for having me. I'm Justine. I'm based in Marseille, south of France, and I'm working in cocoa since 15 years. And now, since 4 years after being in Peru and in London, I decided to create Cacao Latitude, which is basically a specialty cocoa trading company that is sourcing beans for high-end chocolate makers in Europe and all over the world.
Thank you, Justine. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
That's it.
That's it? Okay. Mariana, thank you also for being here. And we would love to hear from you, what you do and who you are.
Hi, Lisanne, Justine, Gustavo, thanks for the invite to this webinar, and hello everybody out there that we cannot see, but I hope you enjoy it very much. So yeah, my name is Mariana de la Rosa, and I'm one of the founders of Gaia Cacao. I've been in the chocolate business chocolate and cacao business for almost 12 years. Started in confectionery, so working for a large multinational in mostly research and development of recipes, so on the science side. And 5 years ago that I came to the Netherlands, let's say, to dive into the entrepreneurial arena of logistics, quality, and sourcing and commercializing cacao. And with Gaia Cacao, it's in the core of what we do. So I'm originally from Venezuela, but I am currently based here in the Netherlands. Yeah, maybe Gustavo, just to I think it's important just for me to portray what Gaia does, because it's a bit of a different model than Latitudes and Cacao Latitudes. So so Gaia Cacao started 2 years ago in 2019, together with my colleague Marika van Zandvoort. As I said, 5 years ago, when we dive into the entrepreneurial, we learn, let's say, hands-on operations on many activities in the sector. And in Gaia, we focus on logistics services. So from sending samples to dispatching a container for our clients. We also do sales and commercializing of cocoa beans, but also derivatives. And let's say the biggest part or the biggest chunk of what we focus is in consultancy. So market studies, sensory and quality analysis, recipe development, and training to NGOs and private organizations. So it is, let's say, a different model. So it's not only sales and commercializing, but I would really like to bring my 5 years of hands-on experience with handy tips to the audience out there.
Awesome. We're looking forward to hearing some of that and some funny stories maybe, and some things that people can learn from.
Yeah, sure. And, funny ones.
Yeah, funny ones. They're usually the most interesting. Not so, sometimes not so funny. Thank you for being here. First, we'll start. Lisanne will introduce the first subject, which is what are cacao buyers looking for, and then we go into the questions to our guest speakers.
Yes, so it's already very interesting how Marianne and also Justine introduced their company very briefly to see what their company does, and also to see how it fits into the buyer landscape. Because when we talk about the question, what are cocoa buyers looking for, there is, of course, not one answer to this question. There's a wide variety of buyers on the market, each with their own philosophy, approach, requirements, interest, their own business culture. So before you reach out to a buyer or do business with a buyer, it is quite important to actually understand whom you're talking to and what kind of company you're dealing with. So here we give some parameters, and in addition to the ones listed here, of course, you can create additional ones. But these parameters really help to analyze the buyer and also understand what they are looking for. And following from that, it also helps to ask the question if this buyer is actually a good match or a good fit for your own company, so for your own philosophy. So, for instance, when we talk about the size of a company, you have large-scale importers. It is likely that they deal with larger volumes of mainstream qualities. But on the other hand, you also have more specialized cocoa importers that work with specialty cacaos from unique origins, unique flavor characteristics, and they tend to deal with lower volumes. So following from that, it's an interesting question to ask yourself, like, in what market segment is this buyer actually active? Is it more on the specialty side or more on the mainstream market segment, or maybe both? That's of course also possible. And then also there are buyers with a range of different activities. You have traders who only work or like source cacao and send it to the next client. to say so, or you have cocoa processors who might source directly from origin, but are engaged in cocoa grinding activities and, for instance, sell to the food manufacturing industry. You also have chocolate manufacturers. Some will source directly from origin. Some others might work through an importer. And this is very often the case for smaller bean-to-bar makers or the craft chocolate makers, who are usually smaller in size, and they can source directly from origin, but they may also work through distributors or cocoa importers. So it is also equally important to actually ask yourself, who is the end client of this buyer? Because you don't just sell your cacao to someone else. Your cacao is moving from through an entire value chain, and it's by understanding where your cacao ends up, you can also create your offer around that and have an interesting relationship with this buyer if you understand these elements. And in addition, also the company mission. You have specific companies that are very much focused on, for instance, or who have an ethical mission or strict sustainability requirements. And there it's also important, of course, to ask yourself the question if the company mission of a buyer fits your own profile and business philosophy. And lastly, as one of the parameters we selected here, you can also ask yourself the question what the geographical focus is of a buyer. Some have a specific focus that they only source cacao from, let's say, one country, Indonesia, or maybe from a specific region, or maybe from they have a wide portfolio. But asking yourself these questions, can really help your relationship with a buyer. And I think Gustavo will go a bit deeper into how to look for that.
Yeah, so not only asking, but also start answering these questions is quite important. And there are some tools that you can use, which is actually quite easy, but not everyone does it before making this first approach to a buyer. And I guess it can be quite frustrating to a buyer to read an email that is not related to the product range, for example. So I think just a very simple thing that can be done is to access a website, for example, of this one buyer that you're targeting, and ask yourself these questions that Lisanne just pointed out. What are the main activities? What do they actually do? And sometimes you can even see if they're importing directly or through another company, for example. So these are the things that you can ask. For example, you can take a look, as Lisanne said, the origins that this company is working with, their main clients or segments they're active in, and most importantly here, also the certification requirements. If they do have minimum certification requirements, for example, some companies might only work with organic certified cacao, and that can already give you an answer as to why and whether you should approach a buyer. So these are simple things, but also you can dive a little bit deeper. Some companies do have annual reports or traceability, sustainability reports that you can basically see the strategic direction of this company, but as well as their sustainability objectives and other elements such as their financial status and investments, so that you can see more or less the size of the company, and you can start making some estimations as to whether this company is interesting for you or not. Also, if it's applicable to this buyer, if you're talking about a company that has a finished product, you can also start asking the question of how they promote their products, for example, how do they tell their stories to their consumers. But even if you're talking about an importer, it's also interesting to see if this company is attending trade fairs and which trade fairs. So these are some tips here in order for you to do this first approach and the first assessment of whether a buyer is interesting for you or not. And of course, to reassess your product range to see if then it's a fit or not. So looking at your varieties, looking at the quantities you can offer, not only the total quantities, but also the exportable quantities. What do you have available from your production or from your supplies that you can actually export? So this is important. Also the qualities you can offer, the post-harvest protocols. Are you doing fermentation drying? Are you working with unfermented cacao? This is very interesting and very important to assess. And what is special about your cacao that you can introduce to this buyer? So origin traceability, stories about your producing communities, and certification or other sustainability policies, for example, from your company. Okay, so our first topic revolves around what cacao buyers are looking for. So first, I would like to ask Justine, Maybe it's a general question because we haven't really seen the origins you're working with. So maybe you can tell a bit about the origins you work with. What are the main aspects that you're considering when you're selecting new origins to work with?
Well, it's a bit complex because first I wanted to mention that I totally understand if it's difficult to read the network of cocoa buyers in the world in general, because even me, after so many years, when I was in the position in middle of Peru to find buyers, it was completely different and not easy to find even on website because people are not really transparent on how they proceed. So I totally understand it might be a bit of a gray area, or at least not easy to understand. And then basically I feel that, it's a mix between really flavor, because of course I'm specialized on specialty cocoa, so flavor is number one. And from what I could see in my experience is mainly from centralized fermentation and drying. I see it's more difficult to get to that level of quality of flavor development and consistency with buying cocoa already fermented and dry from each farmer. And then it's about, yes, any specificity, the story of the project, the location as well is important. Everything will be thrown in the mix because basically some chocolate makers or even myself, we are influenced by the collection you have already. So if you have already a collection, maybe some people are stuck with country names. So they would say, oh, I've got one Colombia, one Venezuela, one Belize. Now I want one India or I want Asia cocoa. So they would stuck as if you would say, I've got a wine from France, one wine from France, then it's finished, right? So for example, in my case, it's not a problem because what I try to develop is having a lot of different terroirs from the same country, considering actually one bean from one country doesn't mean an identity. It means just that it's from the geography, but then there is a lot of diversity within the same country. So I think the market has understood that, but still I would say 80% of my clients are focused on country orientations, right? So they want the collection to be by country.
Okay.
But I would say the specificity, what is your specificity? What is your story? And of course, definitely as of today, at least we as importers and people that know the origin, we would be focusing on environmentally friendly and maybe, I mean, in my personal case, I would choose small holding farmer groups rather than big plantation for the project type. Then when the easiness talks and understanding of the quality in terms of, for example, traces of any pesticide or cadmium levels or consistency, is true that there is still an inclination towards farms, private farms or things like that, because of the fact that it's less complex as an environment. But definitely the fact that it's not, of course, destroying the environment is first criteria with the flavor.
Yeah, so you're also mitigating those risks because you're intermediating in this value chain. So you're mitigating the risk along the chain by addressing these issues for your clients, as I understand.
Yeah, I mean, we are the ones that know better than them, than chocolate makers, because basically chocolate makers, most of it, they have spent their time in a lab and in a production, area. So basically they don't understand all the difficulties of running an operation in origin in not Switzerland, in an environment that is completely different. And effectively, I think people that have lived in cocoa areas understand, for example, the necessity of climate mitigation, climate change mitigation, because we've seen the mountain going down, right? We've seen flooding everywhere. So 10 years ago, we were seeing what is happening in Europe right now in terms of climate really threats, I would say. So this is kind of super present in a way we are choosing our source.
Do you choose a lot according to your own customers' demands, or you're able to push a few origins or a few suppliers that you felt strongly about and you introduce those to your customers?
So I come from the side that is pushing for my value chains towards chocolate makers. So I would say I'm more an ambassador of source than a sourcer from the chocolate maker side. So it depends of your history as a person, right? So I'm more like I've built some value chains, or I care a lot for a group of farmers, and then I'm pushing their cocoa. But it will take, for me, I would say maybe I'm not that efficient, but I would say to place a cocoa, having a nice portfolio of clients and a decent 30 tons volume of specialty cocoa, I would say it takes 4 years to really disseminate the information that is there, send samples, do the groundwork that will make it a nice portfolio of clients that would sustain a value chain. My first worry is how do I make this value chain live forever after the program or the project is finished, is by doing that groundwork of spreading the words, and basically enchant or charm people with my cocoa, basically.
Yeah. Thank you, Justine. Maybe for Mariana, I have a question here as well. What would you point out as the main reasons why you're working with your current suppliers, and who are they? From what countries, and what is the profile of your suppliers' country?
Yeah, we have a small portfolio in Gaia. It's a pretty young company. So we have 4 main origins that we focus on: Ecuador, Sierra Leone, Guatemala, and Venezuela. And it's our main focus at the moment. I mean, Venezuela, for me, being Venezuela carries also some emotional or connection element. We do focus on 2 end clients or end buyers, sort of say. So we do have some specialty product segments, so these craft chocolate makers and so on. But we also have the large buyers, so large players in the industry. And this is mainly for, let's say, mainstream, looking at Venezuelan origins. And now when we're talking about these large players, one element that we see it is very important for our client and that we demand from our source, from origin, it is traceability. So for us, having transparency in the chain, it is a key element to Gaia when it comes, especially a country like Venezuela, which is such a turmoil and such a complex government, logistic permits, and so on. And I think, that this, to some extent, has to do with the change of the legislation in Europe and the big companies shifting to the private sustainability schemes, the due diligence legislation. So we are being requested as suppliers to have clear transparency, and as such, then we demand full transparency and traceability from our source, from origin. And yeah, like Justine said, so quality is super important, but also quality consistency. So it's cacao, so a client is not expecting the identical lot, but they do expect that we deliver consistency. So we need to know what's the volume they can provide to my large client, but also to the small one, and if we can be consistent, because if we fail on-time supply, then we run the risk of losing trust in our buyer. So we need to understand that traceability, volumes, on-time delivery, quality, consistency, and yeah, the story, again, tied up to what Justine said. Gaia is also a company who stands very strongly for the story surrounding the cacao. So it's not only a beautiful story, but a specific story that can be, backed up with strong evidence. Yeah, so it has to be.
Yeah, substantiation is super important. What would you advise suppliers in terms of the traceability? Because we hear that a lot. What is the documentation? What do you want to see as evidence of traceability that is actually something not conceptual, but very, hands-on, very tangible?
Yeah, I think Justine can help me out complement this one. But what we see from the forms of our clients is amount of farmers where they source, or volume. If they have certified volume, how much is the certified volume? We also see in these forms issues related to sustainability. So any forms of child labor, deforestation, climate change, that it is again important for our sourcing and selling strategy. But for transparency, the GPS coordinate is something that some suppliers are requiring. What else? Justine, a ver if you have another one too.
Yeah, I think to be honest, as of today, I don't have, I've been introduced to this geographic system that will, the ICS, because 80% of my portfolio is organic certified. So effectively, you would assume that your supplier, the co-op or the private company exporting, is totally hands-on with the internal control system anyway, because otherwise they wouldn't have the certification. So it's kind of a given. But basically, then you could add an informatic systems to have a code of every bag and stuff. I've got one supplier in Uganda that shared that info with me, but as of today, I don't really know what to do with that info. But basically, it's kind of a backup, and one day you will need it, and then you can see. For me, it doesn't really represent something that is important, but then it's more like the first level, because, remember the chocolate makers, they have other things to do, so they don't go into that details. But basically, first level is that if you say, I'm turning up next week to visit you, that the person will be transparent, and maybe is more, I would say, with the level of Mariana and myself, like the communication level should be quite honest and really deep. Like, you should open a bit your heart and your personality of your company as an exporter first hands, to bring more. You have to be generous in information and in know-how. Why? Because, it's better for me if I know your weakness, I know your strength, we know each other as partners. So then when there is a problem, it's easier to manage it in really confidence. And basically as well, if I'm I'm gonna have to send my clients to you or visit you with television and stuff like that. So I will go to visit the shipper that is the most trustful and that I felt was honest in his way of presenting his company to me, not the one that showed me everything perfect and beautiful. Because then when you go into these deeper practices, which is, bringing TV or a documentary filming or chocolate makers, we bring 10 chocolate makers to visit you for 10 days. I mean, you need to know every detail. And I speak as well practicality, like if you're responsible for 10 chocolate makers in the middle of the Andean mountains to go to Kiabamba, you better have your stuff well organized. Otherwise, it can be a bit worrying sometimes. It's more like a confidence between each others. Then there is a backup with documentation, but documentation is just a little piece of the work.
Awesome. Yeah, I think that also helps to identify the control points, which you should work harder on when you're actually receiving those supplies and creating that relationship, right? So it's good to know the weaknesses, as you guys mentioned. That's very important. And it debunks a few myths, I feel, that people think they should be perfect to start with, but it's about creating an action plan with your buyer.
I think, for example, we have our supplier in Venezuela. They can track, the farmers they source from. They can track the fermentation boxes they use. They can track the fermentation, drying drawers they use. So they do have some sort of system that they have that they can replicate this recipe on and on and on. So that gives me confidence when I'm selling or whatever, that I know he has his system in place. And this is something that small chocolate makers will request it, but then the large ones will have a bigger microscope into this type of activity. And to add on the communication, what Justine is saying, one key tip that I can say now from an agent's perspective, it is that communication is so important, because we're here on the front end of sales or on the front end of commercializing, and then it's important that those channels are well managed. So our partners, we do have WhatsApp groups and emails and systems that they know. So if you go visit Gaia's Instagram website, and you look at a photo of Sierra Leone, that photo was sent by one of the farmers of Sierra Leone to the group, and then they tell, oh, we did this and so, or we're loading a container with a Venezuelan bean, so they send it to the group. So we always keep this communication very, very open, very clear, and they know their role, so they won't communicate, to the end buyer or to the custom clearance agent in the Netherlands, because it isn't our role. So it's understanding what are your responsibilities in your role, and it's important that we respect each other's work.
Interesting. It's like a family WhatsApp group almost, that you have to address the problems together, otherwise you cannot sort it out by yourselves. And I think this is the subject of our next topic, which is practical tips. Mariana already started, so thank you for that. And we are gonna just discuss around a few of the subjects here. The first approach, how you usually expect it to be first approach, and what are these first impressions that really stick to your minds, but also how this is backed up by documentation. You guys already mentioned some of them. Maybe we go a little bit further now, and the no-go decision of actually going for a supplier or not, some of your requirements, but also how you guys are in contact with the suppliers. So you guys already answered parts of it, so I'll ask Lisanne to ask the specific questions now so that we can build upon what you guys already mentioned.
Yeah, so I think it's very interesting how you already clearly said how honest communication is very important. But as a first approach, like what would you say are the best ways for a supplier to make contact with you and other cocoa buyers in Europe, Justine?
Well, I would say when there were no Salon du Chocolat or Chocoa or things like that, he could, instead of meeting at this kind of events, it could be via, of course, our website or Instagram, in order to get the email address of the right person. Let's say it's me or it's Mariana, and then it's really to prepare that email, because if you tell me we are a group of farmers in Honduras, we want to sell beans, I would say great, but you know what, right now in terms of operational workload, sometimes you don't have time to concentrate on this new group that is coming towards you, right? Because you're already working on everything. So then it will be the more concise, summarized information with effectively a little attachment or somehow linked to some activities that they do. Not too much detail, because as well, we don't have time to read the 10 page of the activities of a co-op or something, because we are in our daily work, and effectively we don't have a staff of 10 people. So basically, when you are the buyer, you are the seller, you are the logistic person, the quality person, and doing everything. It's a small team, I would say, compared to other bigger companies. So yes, it would be to really be concise on an email, to present what is really the specific points, and basically you have to charm the person you're gonna attract the interest of somebody. So you have to do everything that you feel is a charming, efficient way of communicating with that person, saying that maybe me as well, when I'm contacting new chocolate makers, it's something that is quite difficult, because some people you would get them over the phone, some others by sending an email, some others that meeting them, some people you get to do business with them after you know them 15 years, So that's not an easy one, but basically, yeah, you should attract the attention with maybe the main specificity of your project. Is it because you're in a protected forest, in an area, and then maybe to Mariana, this email won't touch her because she knows the area already. She has 5 suppliers of the same country, and she's like, sorry, mate, I can't really help you. But for me, like maybe the Honduras, I don't have Honduras, and I don't know, I'm curious. So let me answer that email. At the end of the day, it's about relationship and history as cocoa buyer, I would say. So it's a bit random sometimes. It's not super organized way. And sometimes you attract the attention of somebody, or sometimes you don't. But think about how you would charm in a snapshot. How you would charm that person so that they respond to the email and they get the interest.
Yeah.
Mariana, you want to add something? Yes.
Yeah, and I think to add to Justine is doing a bit of homework, because if I don't have organic beans, then I wouldn't knock the door of an organic chocolate maker. So I would waste that chocolate maker's time. Yeah. So, and we get this a lot via emails. We get emails that we know that farmers, or they haven't done their homework. So it doesn't take time to, you know, write a charming email and then do a bit of homework to knock that door.
And would you, for instance, be like, as a first go no go impression, as Justine already said, like, also don't send too much or send too much information. But what are the specific things that you really want to see in that email, so you know right away, okay, this is interesting or not?
Yeah, I think the story, a good backed up story, is interesting. A very well done quality analysis, and also, you know, some sort of commitment of consistency. It is the key. So I would say like a nice brochure, because we also get like many, like, here are my beans from Papua New Guinea, and then it's like this blurry and messy quality spec, and then you say, well, if the quality spec looks this messy, I don't even want to imagine how the beans are going to be. So if we are knocking that door to sell our product, then we need to go with strong foot.
And maybe some information that is really relevant for us is kind of the total volume per year, the number of hectares you cover, the number of farmers you cover, and basically, yeah, because, you know, if the guy is asking you to be an exporter and he has 1 ton per year or 2 tons, you know, he's already going to be problematic, and he's going to need to be partnering in origin with somebody else, so that you can really export this cocoa. Or you could say, maybe I've got 2 tons right now, but a potential of 50 tons or, you know, 10 tons, or, you know, like, I think it's different from what I have to offer right now and what is the potential per year and what is the quality segment for. So being a bit precise on these bullet points so that the person will understand what you're looking for. Because if you say I've got 1,000 tons to sell, effectively, the price point, for example, is not going to be the same. And maybe to have an idea on price ranges, I would say, you know, if you want to sell 100 tons, you need to think as a specialty that it will be more around $3,000. And then if you have 5 tons of super premium with a backed up project, amazing stuff, like, it's going to be more around $5,000 FOB. So, you know, like, as well, you have to be understanding the price point, because if you want to sell 100 tons at $5,000 FOB, then you're going to have a bit of a problem.
Yeah, Gustavo, you wanted to add something?
No, I wanted to ask, actually, maybe if you look at the track record of the suppliers, if they're working with someone else, how do you assess reputation? I think this is important.
Yeah, definitely. But I can understand that sometimes you don't have a lot of track records, right? So you have to begin somewhere. And I know it because I've begun from zero on some cacaos. So, you know, I think that's something Mariana and me, we could understand. Maybe less of a chocolate maker because he doesn't want to take so much risk, but us, because we know what it takes. Maybe we would be more inclined to begin with people that are less prepared. I would say that's the advantage of working with us as importers or sourcers, because we know the ground area, the ground work, you know.
Yeah.
In my case, very specifically to Venezuela, for instance, again, I don't put the same formula to Guatemala or Ecuador, but for Venezuela, I would just rely on my partners, reliable partners. So if I get approached by another supplier, I would ask them, for example, an agronomist, I would say, oh, Francisco, do you know this person? I got approached by this other supplier. So I would always use my close, reliable network. Or if I get, oh, Justine or Marika, or do you know this new farmer? Because building up a reputation, the cacao sector is very small. So at the end of the day, some way or another, we end up meeting each other.
Yeah, we will have heard something that is
Yes.
an interesting story, if it's reliable or not. How do you guys create these local networks? Like, is it organizations? Do you actively do it, or something that you do by default? And do you guys use like business support organizations, for example, to do some background checks?
Who is answering where?
Yeah, okay, I'll start with Justine.
Well, in my case, it all begins, you that represent your life, so if I lived in Peru, I would bring a portfolio that is mainly diverse in Peru, or I lived in Venezuela a little bit, so I know when people speak about Venezuela, like if I get the help of Mariana, because I know the areas, right? So first is about your history. That's an advantage compared to other traders that might not know the origin or haven't lived in the origin. When I don't know the country, then effectively is about simple meetings with people at Chocoa, or seeing their Instagram as well if they are active. Of course, I feel like the visual understanding, it's important as well. So sometimes you don't have to meet for example Oko Caribe or Zorzal to know them already because you've seen them on Instagram. So I've realized over the last 4 years that communication is key, which is not the way we used to work as an old-fashioned way, which was more like phone calls and the person. But I feel it's kind of nice as well that people know you from visual images at first, like a little Instagram account or something, and then they can discover what is behind as a strong information. I feel it's kind of important nowadays, I would say, right, during COVID time where people couldn't really travel.
Yeah, in our webinar last week, sorry Mariana, just to emphasize this point that Justine brought forward. Last week we had a webinar about coffee, and our guest speaker said Instagram has become such a tool. Just to get imagery, just to get a feeling of what origin is, because we're not able to travel at the moment.
Definitely.
Mariana, you like your Instagram stories? Tell us a little bit about.
No, I agree with Justine. In fact, the last time I traveled to a region was in 2016. Because of personal reasons. I became a mother, then COVID came on board, so I haven't been able to go to a cocoa origin country. So my relationships rely on my group, WhatsApp groups or Instagrams, and then I know if I know this origin. But I completely agree with Justine. Yes.
Let's jump on to the next subject. Lisanne will only introduce and then we go to Q&A, okay? Because then we get the audience to also ask us questions.
Yeah. The complying with legal requirements, of course, very important in cocoa trade or in any trade. Well, this is really an entry level. If you don't comply with the legal requirements, you cannot enter. You're not allowed access to the European market. So we gave the reference here to the website where you can see all the important legal requirements and also additional buyer requirements. We talk about that topic as well, but I think it's very important to actually ask Justine and Marianne about their experience with this topic, because well, additional buyer requirements often revolve around the quality, sustainability topics, specific, for instance, certification. Yeah, Gustavo, I think you have the first question around this topic, because we can take a bit more time for here because there are not many questions in the Q&A yet, I understood. So
okay, let's go ahead with some questions. Then let's do 2 questions. And if you guys want to ask questions on the Q&A here, we need to make sure that is within time. But my first question to Justine is, what is the main issue that you face in terms of compliance? Either compliance with legislation or compliance with your buyer requirements in order to get this product in?
So as of today, my nightmare is about pesticide and herbicide substances traces in organic cocoa. So basically, it has become something that was a framework, the organic certification, considering that in good faith you would do agriculture as organic, and that was good enough. But over the last 4 years, basically buyers have been digging and wants a lab analysis on everything. So we do pre-shipment sample analysis before shipment. That should be representative of the lot, but then is a little bit like Russian roulette, because when you re-sample and redo the lab analysis on arrival, then you found traces. So basically, we have 2 solutions. Or we are facing a big issue in organic certification scheme, and we have to talk to the certifiers, and why is there a link with 0 traces, lab analysis that costs a lot of money and certification. Or we push back towards the shippers and the origin, and we say your control system is not in place. Sorry, we found micro traces. Micro, when I mean micro, is 0.02 milligram per kilo of something that would destroy the work of 10 months and 100 people, because the 25 tons or the 10 tons are they go to conventional cocoa basically, because there is a little trace of 0.03 or 4 milligram per kilo. So this is really an issue that somebody that is organic should double check, not considering that I've got a certificate, then I'm fine. It's really like if one of your farmer is using something that is chemical, your 25 tons, they're gonna show red light and you're not gonna pass at the end, even on arrival. Then one element that is super important is the humidity management in the container. We found solutions sometimes, but even with a super pro exporter of Peru, I had a problem. So you lose maybe 12 tons because it arrived completely moldy, because it was 7.6% humidity. In Lima, it was 99% humidity in August. So then you get moldiness on arrival, and the specialty cocoa would never accept that. So you have to deal with that matter, and effectively that puts a big, hit to your relationship with the shipper and your money as well, your profit margins and everything. So it's a huge risk. So really like to physical quality. How are we going to manage the 30 days in the container? And, when we say 7.5% humidity is not a joke, it's kind of, otherwise it transforms into an extreme loss. And as well delays, because the client was waiting for his cocoa. And then I would say cadmium, it's more like known now as of today that you have to be below 1 milligram or 0.8 milligram. And for some area it's really complex. I guess maybe you as a project managers, you are dealing with that subject maybe, or, I've seen there is some potential improvement with giving more entrant to the, natural entrant to the tree, but still it's a burden on some regions, like in Venezuela, Ecuador, Colombia, and Peru. So that's problematic. And then I would say more we've seen with Mariana sometimes even on conventional cocoa. Now people are becoming to analyze it. So even on conventional cocoa regarding mercury, lead, HAP, all this kind of stuff, they would check anyway. So even if it's conventional, you better have not too much pesticide, herbicide, and all these kind of nasty product that you don't want in the food, because now people are becoming, more inclined to double check everything. And, at the end of the day, it's a lot of money to the lab, but as well as a lot of money at stake when you are dealing with rejection on arrival.
Yeah, and the super control of the supply chain in general. Mariana, maybe together with your addition, can you also tell us how a supplier should inform if they already anticipate one of these issues in their value chain?
I think one of the things we've learned with bringing beans from origin is that not always, and this works for any food category. So we have seen discrepancies on results on the labs at origin and the European certified labs. So it is important for the producer, so the shipper, to always do a representative sample. And there's, ask your buyer, so ask Justine, ask myself, so what is a representative sample? So to have a sample being measured at origin, so you're sure about what you're delivering on your the content of your beans, anything, so pesticides or heavy metals, cadmium, everything, you need to measure it at origin, and then we are going to measure it here. And then that correlation, if it's a deviation, you need to embed it in your process. So see how far you are. So that would be one advice, to have this correlation in the backbone of your business to avoid these rejections.
And I guess identifying the control points that are causing this, the gap in the representative sample and in the sample when at arrival.
Yeah. But also there are some, for example, the suppliers I work with have identified those producers or area where there's, they call it like the low cadmium areas. So this is very important for us, because we are risking time, we are risking a lot of money, and we are risking continuity of the business. So it has become a topic, and it's something that we in Gaia we put a lot of emphasis to our clients, because so that's one. And regarding the moisture, this is again another learning. We also had cases of, here, chocolate maker, here's your big bag of mold, and it's not nice when you're a chocolate maker, you're buying your expensive beans and you open it and it's full of mold.
Yeah.
So it is very important to understand that you as a supplier are in control of your process. So what's your moisture? Do you have grain pro bags or possibility? Can you tell your shipper to put it below deck? I don't know, can you get desiccants, moisture control bags within your container? How many? So all these things are very important for you to be in control of your process and avoid surprises on arrival. So if you're already saying lab can have discrepancy, make sure you know what is that value. Moisture, fermentation and quality is another one that can jeopardize your lot. So you send a sample and it's perfect, you send a container, it is not even close to the sample you sent. So that's another terrible way to lose business. So
big red flag.
This is very practical, very good tips and advices. I want to introduce or invite back Justine, because we have 4 minutes left, and there's also a question from the audience, just to finish with that.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Yes, we do. Well, running in now question after question, but so we will not have time to take care of all the questions. But as I said before, we shall answer them after the webinar within a couple of days. But there were two related to certification, so maybe to join them together. So on the fair trade or rainforest, what your idea is on if you have an advantage if you would have a certification on the fair trade, and on the rainforest, is there a high demand for rainforest cocoa products? Justine, maybe if you could start.
Maybe for rainforest, I don't see it much in my remit, because maybe I'm talking about more specialty craft chocolate makers, so they are not really aware of Rainforest Alliance certification. It's more for the big guys. But then for fair trade organic, for the medium size, I think, yes, it could be really an advantage, because as well, when the market goes down, you are a bit covered, you can still make a difference compared to the market crashing, when the future market is going down, when you have big volumes. So I feel for bigger volumes, like people that are doing 200 tons, 500 tons, fair trade organic is a window to open for you to enter. So that's always a differentiation that could work, specifically when you are doing kind of decent volume, like 500 tons or 1,000 tons, things like that. For this real specialty, like if you're doing like maximum 30 tons, 50 tons of really special cocoa, anyway, you're a bit out of that remit, because you don't need really fair trade. You're already quite up in terms of pricing, and you would pay your farmers hopefully a decent price. Like I would say the Chuncho project I have in Peru, we pay like $3,000 the farmers, we ferment and dry ourselves, and we arrive at, let's say, $5,000 FOB. So we are out of the fair trade remit anyway. So this is more specialty, wouldn't need, but for bigger volume, I think it's always a good window. It's a bit like organic. It's a window open, whereas some other doors will be closed, right? If you wouldn't have that legal differentiation.
Thank you, Marianne. Would you like to add something to it?
No, absolutely agree with what Justine say. In the specialty segment, these certifications don't have that much value now. In the large volume market, it saves you time, so that you already have this trust to avoid the hassle of filling up these lengthy forms. So it does save you time. It is not a requirement, but it is a super nice to have. But I agree with Justine. It's tied to volumes and market segment.
For example, Peru. Peru has found a window because of fair trade organic. Like otherwise they were not on the map 10 years ago. And when I was calling from Peru, the big buyers, they were like, oh yeah, I pay you Ivory Coast minus 15 pounds differential. I was like, well, that's kind of completely different than Ivory Coast, but basically a guy sitting in London doesn't care where you're coming from, your cocoa is coming from. If they want to put you in the recipe as blend or basic stuff, cocoa beans, then why they should pay more. So this is completely a tool for distinguishing yourself as an origin and as a cooperative or a private shipper.
True. And for Dominican Republic, we studied recently in this.
Yes, Gustavo, we have some other questions, some not 100% related to the webinar, but we are able to answer these. So please, audience, give us a few days and then we will send it out to you.
Yeah.
The time is running against us. I think we could maybe continue for another hour interviewing Justine and Mariana, because it's quite interesting to hear from your experience the background, on how to sell your cocoa. From here, I would like to thank you very much for participating and taking your time to guide our attendance through this subject. And also Gustavo and Lisanne, thank you for having the presentation and also your guidance. I leave the closing word to you, Gustavo and Lisanne.
From my side, I would like to thank Yantine for hosting this webinar, CBI as always, and of course our guest speakers that are here sharing so much of their daily work, which for us, this is translated into so much valuable information. You have no idea of how these little tips actually can help us, but also the attendees to understand better what the priorities are. So I want to thank you so much for being here. And Lisanne.
Yeah, I copy all your words. Thank you so much.
Thank you guys, and see you next time.
The space. See you. Good luck.
Thank you. Yeah.